Welcome to The Sideshow.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of The Sideshow. We have got a great show for you today. I'd just like to remind all those of you who are with us and enjoying our program, please feel free to subscribe and like. Our show always helps with the ever-present algorithm, but more importantly, we've got some music to discuss. And Mike is going to be leading the charge today. So, Mike, why don't you let everybody know what we're going to be talking about today?
Thanks, Mark. We're talking about live albums this week, and we're going to talk about aside from one of my favorite bands from the 1970s, and specifically, we're going to talk about Little Feat's "Waiting for Columbus," a live album from, I believe it was 1979 when it was released, and we're going to talk about side one. And as I said, Little Feat is a favorite band of mine, and they're a very interesting band. I think they were a very well liked, popular, not sort of more of the AOR, album oriented rock crowd rather than the AM radio crowd. But they were relatively popular, but they never got big and massive and stuff like that. They were a relatively down to earth, street level kind of band, guitar oriented, and they just had a in terms of their lyrics and just the vibe. They were kind of they had a sense of humor and just an offbeat sense of things, and sort of just they had their own unique sort of feel, and they were not like a lot of other bands that were big concert attractions in the 70s, at least as far as I'm concerned. The real leader of the band, in my opinion, was a man named Lowell George, and he had been a musician, from a young age, and he'd been involved in a variety of different things. And come the late 60s, he's in California, Los Angeles area, and he ends up playing music with Frank Zappa. And one of Zappa's musicians had left, and so he recruited Lowell George to come in. And again, this was in the late 60s, 1968, 1969. So for a while, Lowell George was playing guitar in Frank Zappa's, in the Mothers of Invention.
Yeah.
And Lowell George had come up with a song, and the song was called "Willin'," and it wasn't really Frank Zappa type song, and there's a number of different versions about how it came to be that Lowell George left the Mothers of Invention with Zappa, but in any case he left, and the original bass player for the Mothers of Invention, his name was Roy Estrada, and he played on the initial incarnation of the Mothers of Invention on the first album, and through the first, I believe, 5 albums by the Mothers of Invention, and he left with Lowell George. And so we've got a long-time member of Frank Zappa's band. And so there's a skewed, sort of whacked-out, zonked perspective that in and of itself is going to bring to the proceedings. There were 2 other musicians, a drummer named Richie Hayward, who had played, who Lowell George had known for a period of time, and he played in a band called, I believe it's the Fraternity of Man, and they recorded a song that found its way onto the Easy Rider soundtrack, and that was a song called "Don't Bogart That Joint." And
sounds like a metaphor.
and Frank Zappa was he did not approve of drug use. He didn't apparently did not use drugs himself, and didn't tolerate it interfering with his band members' sharpness and ability to play the material properly. And there's some versions that say that there's reference to weed, as in marijuana, in the song "Willin'," and there's some people that thought that Zappa didn't approve of that, and so kind of gave Lowell George the heave-ho. The final member of the band was a keyboard player named Bill Payne, who was apparently a very skilled, virtuoso type piano player. So those four members formed Little Feat, and regardless of what Zappa may have thought about all this stuff, he apparently was instrumental in getting the band a record contract with Warner Brother Records. Mm-hmm. So at the very least, he respected their ability as musicians and gave them some assistance in that regard. And they released an album in 1971, called Little Feat, an eponymously titled debut album. And it's the sort of Zappa influence is there. It's not, the music doesn't sound like Frank Zappa at all, mm-hmm. but it's just weird. It's weird. The song "Willin'," which was a very rudimentary version in my opinion, although apparently Lowell George had cut his hand on a gasoline powered model airplane, and so it was Ry Cooder, who was this is in Los Angeles in the mm-hmm. late 60s. He was around, and he actually plays the slide guitar part on the version of "Willin'" on their first album. "Willin'" went on to be covered by Linda Ronstadt. It was on her "Heart Like a Wheel" album, mm-hmm. which was a big album, and that was probably a lot of people's initial introduction to that song. There's other songs. There's a real kind of odd sort of psychotic blues called "Hamburger Midnight." And then a blues medley of Howlin' Wolf songs, 44 Blues and How Many More Years. How Many More Years was the song that provided the basis for Led Zeppelin's How Many More Times. Mm-hmm. And those songs sounded, if you've ever heard Howlin' Wolf, he's got his own style of mm-hmm. doing things, and this sort of fit into that. It was interesting material. They recorded a second album, and they recorded 6 albums before this live album that we're going to be talking about. And those albums all kind of one by one moved closer and closer towards a style of music that Little Feat was playing at the end of the 70s. But they can be kind of grouped into three different groupings, 2 albums each. The second album, which maintained the same 4-man lineup as the first album, was called Sailin' Shoes. And there's the title track, Sailin' Shoes, is one of their better known tracks from their early output. They did sort of a spruced up version of "Willin'," and then other songs like "Easy to Slip," the "Cold, Cold, Cold," an odd tune called "Tripe Face Boogie." It wasn't quite as spare or harsh, depending on the material, as the first album had been. Mm-hmm. But it was still a relatively pared down sound, and a fair amount of space between the instruments and what have you. After their second album, Roy Estrada, the bass player, quit, and I think he left the music business for the most part, and became a computer programmer. But in any case, Lowell George recruited a bass player named Kenny Gradney, and also he recruited another guitar player named Paul Barrere. And then also another musician became a member of the band. His name was Sam Clayton, and he played percussion congas and things of that nature. And so, in addition to losing their original bass player, they took on a replacement and then added two more musicians, which really kind of fleshed out their sound. And they moved away from some of the more straightforward blues type stuff that they'd been doing earlier, and added kind of more of like a New Orleans funk rhythm kind of, or let me say a New Orleans funky rhythm that they hadn't had before. And they released, their first albums had been in 1971 and 72. In 1973, they released their third album. It was called Dixie Chicken. And and that album is a classic. It had a ton of good material. One of the better songs is we're going to be talking about on the live album. The title track, Dixie Chicken. They did a cover song from a New Orleans musician named Alan Toussaint called On Your Way Down, which is one of the high points. And then a number of other tracks. It was a classic. And around this time, they started to develop a reputation as a hot live act. And there's I've got some bootleg recordings that I think were taped FM simulcasts of live concerts from 1973. One from New York City, and then a couple of shows from Denver, Colorado in 1973. And they were still playing a lot of their material from their earlier albums, but with these added musicians, they'd become more like the Little Feat that we were going to see later in the 70s. In 1974, same band lineup, and this is the same band lineup that we're going to hear on the live album that we're going to talk about. But their fourth album was called Feats Don't Fail Me Now, and by that point, they had their style down. And if anything, it was just a little bit too tight, too sharp, too smooth for some listeners who when they first come out, they sort of like this sort of what I call kind of a zonked out sensibility. But there is a lot of great stuff on the Feats Don't Fail Me Now album. The title track, there's a song called "Oh Atlanta," which we're gonna talk about. They played on the live album. Spanish Moon, a lot of good stuff. I mean, all these albums that I've mentioned so far are well worth anybody's time to check out individually. And the second album was a little tighter, a little more elaborate than the first album. The third album had a different band and they'd sort of moved into a different area, but kind of kept some of this good-humored, offbeat, goofball stuff. And then by this fourth album, they are a razor-sharp, tight-playing band. And as I said, Lowell George was the leader of the band. He's kind of the person who started the band. The lead guitar player played a mean slide guitar. But by their fifth album, which came out in 1975, it'd been one album a year, their first five albums, the first, 71, 72, etc. In 1975 was their fifth album. It was called The Last Record Album. And Lowell George kind of started to step back a little bit for whatever reason. And Paul Barrere, the guitarist who'd come in 1973, and Bill Payne, the keyboard player, started to have their songs become more of the focus of the albums. And not so much with Lowell George. And they were started to move into more of almost like a jazz fusion type focus on the material that they were playing. And that continued for their sixth album and the final album that they recorded in the studio before this live album was released. And that was called Time Loves a Hero. and it was similar in many respects to the fifth album, but if anything, even placed more emphasis on this sort of jazzier instrumental playing. And the title track was written by Paul Barrere, I believe, and the and it was starting to move away from the even more so away from the Lowell George type sensibility. Although George was still a member of the band, still the leader of the band for the most part, and they continue to tour and have a lot of success. All of these albums that I've mentioned are worth anybody's time if you like 70s music, 70s guitar music, and it's all of these albums are well represented in one form or another on the live album Waiting for Columbus, which came out in, I believe it's 1979. I think it actually is 1978. I'm looking down at the album cover, and it says copyright 1978. So
well, there you have it.
1978. And so, but before we talk about it, I mean, what any of your thoughts, Mark, on the band before we move on?
Absolutely. It's when I think of Little Feat, and by you talked about how like the Little Feat that we all came to know and love. When you get past the first couple albums and you get to this point where they've added these musicians, I really do think that's when Little Feat became Little Feat. That of people that are familiar with songs like Dixie Chicken and the music off of this particular album, that fuller band, and it kind of put them in a category. When you think about music, this is the type of music that I've seen over the years you have consistently enjoyed. And let me see if I can sum up kind of how they become this music. One of the things is this notion, first of all, of multiple guitars, right? You got to have multiple guitars. You got more going on, and multiple percussionists is even a bigger, right? Like plus to have a really full sound. And I think what that translates to, if you take the right type of music, it gets music that is really danceable. And let me kind of explain what I think. You can watch like a jazz trio, and you can listen to what they're playing, and you can, when you want to respond physically to the music, you can just, and you are capturing everything that band is putting down by doing this, right? Just the way the sound comes out, what you're feeling is that beat. And the beat, you can kind of see the stand-up bass, him playing that, the drum for that does it. Now, a band like Little Feat, and you see the same thing with like the Grateful Dead too. You're listening to what's going on and you want to dance, so you start rocking back and forth. But then there's other music that is hitting you as a part of it. You can't just move back and forth. Now you got to move your arms if you really want to try to capture the feeling. And then you got to start moving your legs because there's that other percussion thing going on here. And pretty quick, there is enough music. It's like a multi-beat type experience. Obviously, a good song, you've got a beat, but the multiple instruments coming at you demands that you put other parts of your body into action. And I think that is the type of music that Little Feat makes. There's a lot going on. There's a funk over here. There's a groove over here. There's a guitar piece going over here. It's not just rhythm and lead. There's just more to it that you want to respond to. And I think that Little Feat is a great example of a band that puts out music like that. And it is no surprise to me at all that they were actually, I think, had a better reputation as a live band than as a commercially successful hit producer. Right? So the live experience. So that is always what I think of when I think of Little Feat. And I, see people at a Little Feat concert dancing with their whole bodies, right? Nobody's in there just doing this, right? And I think as we listen to some of this music today, you'll get a better feel for what I'm talking about, because you'll be moving everything as we listen to Little Feat.
Well, and the comparison to the Grateful Dead is a good one. The Grateful Dead had two drummers,
Yeah,
and the percussionist and a conventional drummer, and then a percussionist in Little Feat. Another band that has some similarities would be the Neville Brothers. Very percussion oriented, and just the polyrhythms is maybe the word that finds its way into the music. And it's not particularly complex, intricate music.
No.
I mean, it's nothing like, some progressive music where they have real intricate, bass and percussion rhythms. It's not like that. It's something that it's easy to let the music make your body move.
Yeah.
And I was, during the 80s, I was going to Grateful Dead. I mean, I was going to Grateful Dead concerts for about 10 years, and I was hanging around with a lot of other people who listened to the Grateful Dead. I mean, there was kind of a scene in Milwaukee when I was living there with the Dead and whatnot. And a lot of the people that liked the Grateful Dead liked Little Feat. And so there was and Little Feat is a different band than the Dead. For a number of different reasons, but both of those bands had the qualities that you were describing earlier about how your body responds to that kind of music, and it's still want to move, and in a fun, not taking themselves too seriously kind of way.
I look at bands like The Band, right? Also had this kind of just feel to it where there's, whether you want whatever, I got to move my whole body, right? If I'm going to be responsive to this music.
Well, and the band, it's not as percussion oriented.
No.
And they were a very unique combination of different musicians, but I agree with you that the music had different levels or different, there was picture in picture.
Yeah.
the musical equivalent of picture in picture.
Yeah.
And so that's a good comparison. And I definitely agree with you that when they moved into the sextet, the six-man band, I mean, because in my humble opinion, Dixie Chicken and Feats Don't Fail Me Now, those two albums are that is the high point of their studio output.
Yeah.
I mean, after this live album, they put out one more album called Down on the Farm, and Lowell George had written some songs, and he was starting to kind of reassert himself. And while still in his 30s, before that album was released, he died of a heart attack. And then they put out that album, and then that was basically the end of their recording. Although they did come back later in the 80s, and I actually went to see them on their first tour, and it was great. But it wasn't the same. Old George, he just introduced a certain skewed perspective on life, the universe, and everything that really couldn't be replaced or maintained with someone taking his place. But in any case, let's start to talk about the album. Again, 1978. I got a copy of it here. The front cover, and the artist who did that illustration is named Neon Park, and he was used on a lot of their albums, starting with their second album, I think, through their last album, Down on the Farm, in 1979. On the back cover, there's a picture of the band on stage, a list of the songs and whatnot. It's a double album, so there is a gatefold, which shows it's got pictures of the. If I can get it open here. Pictures of the individual band members and the band on stage. It's got a sign that was on one of the ticket counters at where they played. Very distinctive album cover. I mean, and that picture kind of sums up in some ways the vibe that they put out. The opening, the very opening track on side one, on the beginning of the album, is a short piece called "Join the Band," and it's really just a number of the band members doing kind of an a cappella of this short song called "Join the Band," and it's not really. I'm not going to play any part of the clip. It's very short, and then you get I believe he was a DJ in Washington D.C. Local DJ. The 3 of the 4 tracks that we're going to talk about were recorded at a concert at the Listener Auditorium in Washington D.C. So there's a DJ, a local DJ introduction. And then they start right in, and the first track on the album is from the Dixie Chicken album called "Fat Man in the Bathtub," and that kind of sums up, in a certain way, just what they were like. And it's a Lowell George Penn song. And why don't we listen to the beginning of it, for the first minute or so, and then we can start our discussion on the other side.
All right.
All right. So now at the very beginning of the song, you get what we were talking about there. You can really sense we've got a drummer and a percussion player. So it's got those polyrhythms are there.
Yeah.
And also there's a very 70s keyboard synthesizer sound there. And not as it doesn't sound as synthetic and as shimmery as you were going to get like in the 80s when sort of synthetic creation of sound became a little bit more of a part of some pop music. This had a more down to earth kind of feel to it. And Lowell George, I said, wrote the song. He's the lead vocalist. He's talking about Billy and Juanita.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever's going on between them. I mean, it's this is not the sort of music where you pick apart the lyrics, and search for deeper meaning. Really, it's fun stuff, and there's a fair amount of wordplay there, and it's just don't bring me down, baby. Is really what Billy's trying to say.
Yeah, it seems like either Billy wants Juanita or Billy gets Juanita from time to time. I mean, I like the notion that Juanita might be a working girl, and Billy has fallen for this working girl, and from time to time he has to kind of sit off to the side and listen to Juanita moan a little bit, and which is. He might be happy to have Juanita, but these periods of time aren't his favorite. Especially when he's looking to get his rocks off. So yeah, there's some allusions to some sex, some allusion to some drugs, in the song as well. Frank Zappa wouldn't have been happy with it.
Well, I mean, and there's certainly lyrical support for the idea that she's a hooker.
Yeah.
I mean, you put my money in your meter, baby, so it won't run down. Now, is that like, hey, I want you to be able to stay at my apartment as long as you can, so I'll put stuff in your parking meter so you don't have to an excuse to fly the coop. But I'd say particularly that, while he's waiting behind out in the waiting room, and she's behind a closed door and she's moaning, with another guy.
Yeah.
I mean, this shit doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a fun song, and really one of their better songs, one of their classic songs.
Yeah.
And a good opener for a concert, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. People are dancing, listening to this song. It makes you want to move. It's got, and like I said, I don't have a name. Maybe it's the polyrhythms that you were talking about, but you can't just bob your head. You want to get everything moving here on this particular song. You see it, you feel it with the music, and it's a fun way to get it going. And one last thing, they do. Although I wouldn't consider them exceptional vocalists, right? They do a great job with the vocals. The vocals are an important part. I mean, the way that this, he's, Juanita. I mean, that kind of, you've got all this kind of funkiness through the verses going on, but it's a really tight chorus that it takes no time for you to kind of get into the groove of what they're saying. So a really fun song to listen to. And I'd agree, you have that weird kind of join the band that starts, but this is the real start of the show, and it's a great way to do it. And the quality of the vocals, or the lack thereof, depending on how you look at it, is whatever it is well suited to the material. And the how I like to describe this kind of music is it's music to unjangle your bones to. So before we move on from this song, there's let's listen to about a minute of the instrumental break, because you get some of the synthesizer and guitar work, a little taste, and then we'll finish up our discussion after. Sounds good. There you hear that, and when I mentioned the synthesizer there before, I mean, you can just hear that wom 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 wom, and
picture being at a concert and you can see the band on stage and there's lights from higher up and that sound is coming out and it's loud.
Mm-hmm.
It managed to have, I mean, it's synthesizer music with some blood flowing through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with the guitars thrown in there, it kind of, that's a short little slice of good old Little Feat instrumental music,
Mm-hmm.
and a little slicker than it sounded on the studio version back from 1973, but good stuff.
Well, and I mean, they had a habit of going through and reworking and continuing to improve their music in some cases for years. So you will, the versions that you'll hear throughout this album, they did some extending of them for the live audiences to extend the solos or to extend some of the instrumental portions across the entire album. I think it's not uncontroversial to say that some of the versions on this album were better than some of the versions on the original studio albums that came out. But it was part of their DNA to continue to work on these songs. I think a lot of bands, you kind of put out an album and yes, you're performing those songs in concert, but you're done with them and you're moving on, which was not the case here. I mean, you started the conversation talking about the song Willin', which was kind of the song that, he left the Mothers with. I mean, that was on their first album. They did another version of it on their second album. There is different and new improved albums on all they put out a lot of live albums and they've got a lot so they never really got done with some of these songs. They continue to work on them. And that's why I think you hear just kind of a little bit more than you might have heard from the original release on the studio albums. So.
Well, and that's true in a number of ways. On their second album called Sailing Shoes, there were two different songs that they would play together in concert. The first one was called Cold, 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 and then the second one was Tripe Face Boogie. Mm-hmm. And the cold, cold, cold was that girl is freezing cold. But in any event, on the Feats Don't Fail Me Now album from 1974, they play a version of those songs put together. Mm-hmm. And it's in the studio, but it's because those songs had become a big thing in their live shows. So yep. Those are two more songs that appeared in sort of revamped studio versions on a subsequent album. And as kind of a lead up to the next track, because this is consistent with what you were saying about how they continued to refine their material primarily on stage as time went by. The second track on this side is called All That You Dream, and it's a song from their fifth album, where they'd started to move into a more like jazz fusion type style. And there's an interesting introduction to this song that we're going to hear in a minute. And they played this song when I saw them in 1987 with the post Lowell George version of the band. And I can talk about what you were talking about in that respect after. So let's hear the beginning of track number 2, which is called All That You Dream. And then we'll pick up our discussion after.
Okay.
All right. This song was written by both Bill Payne and Paul Barrere, and I've always thought that this is one of the cooler introductions, to a live song. And it's not. It's a little bit more fleshed out because there's a similar intro on the studio version, but it does not have the punch that this one does, in my humble opinion. And I mentioned when I saw them in 1987, and they played this song among others. And I mean, during this intro, Paul Barrere came out, and he has this sort of metallic blue Stratocaster guitar, and he ends up doing a full-blown guitar solo just during this intro, and it was just fucking great. And I can remember it was at the I think it was at the Riverside Theater in Milwaukee that they played. It was somewhere in Milwaukee. It was a great concert. Even though it wasn't the original Little Feat, but in any case, All That You Dream. It's a song about not just life on the road. When they say I can't be around this kind of show no more, it suggests sort of the traveling circus that's a rock band touring on the road and whatnot. But the lyrics are basically describing that you dream about things, you chase the clouds, but you just follow the rules and keep your eyes on the road that's ahead of you. And it's not particularly profound, but kind of uplifting and just telling people to take care and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
good song.
Yeah, it is. And I think, set aside how it gets extended in the live performances and that type of thing, this thing to me is a very 70s pop song sound to it. I don't consider this an insult. You will, Mike, but it's not. Captain and Tennille could have played this song. You could hear this song with Tony Tennille's vocals, right? I can just see here going, all that I dream. It's a very, and even the outro to the song sounds like would have been if Captain and Tennille would have got a few more keyboards and stuff and not as much guitar. But the feel to the song is very, very smooth poppy, right? Type rock and roll from this time period. And I don't see that as a negative. I think it's an output of the time. This was the mid 70s when this music was being put together, and that's kind of the feel that a lot of songs had, especially if a band was in any way, and I don't think Little Feat necessarily was, but this idea of let's make a hit, let's make a song for the album that'll be commercially successful, which Little Feat had struggled with, right, getting just commercial hits out the door. You can see how something like this might be the type of stuff that they're putting together. But I don't say that in any type of negative way. That just it's got this mid-70s pop feel to it. I think it's executed a lot better than a bunch of mid-70s pop bands would have done it. But I definitely get that feel as I'm listening to the song.
Well, and I don't take that. I don't take that your comment as knocking the music, because you're right. Because this song does have this interesting guitar intro, and Lowell George's slide guitar gets thrown in there and whatnot. But but as I sort of suggested, the lyrics are not that deep.
Yeah,
they're not bad lyrics. It's a good song. The message is worthwhile, but it doesn't have that same, make your body move, want to go in different directions.
It's more of a
sort of feel. That's true, but it was I had this. A lot of the this might have been the first album by Little Feat that I got,
Mhm.
because these are the versions of all the songs on certainly on this side, and well, really all the songs on this album. They're the first versions I heard.
Yeah.
And as I started to pick up the studio material, a lot of times I'd find myself, I like the versions on Waiting for Columbus better.
Yeah.
Not unlike if I want to listen to Deep Purple, I'll listen to Made in Japan and not Machine Head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Deep Purple and Little Feat, not really the best comparison, but that idea of
Same concept though.
Let's take a closer match. The Grateful Dead. I mean,
Yeah.
I almost listen exclusively to live Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
I mean, once in a while I'll put on Working Man's Dead. Even rarer, I'll put on American Beauty. And then the rest of the studio stuff, almost never. But I listen to a lot of live. I think that Little Feat's studio material is much more accessible than the Grateful Dead's. But I would tend to say that, and you alluded to this earlier, they were more successful as a live act during the 70s than they were. Although I'll tell you, you can find this on YouTube. There's an episode of the Midnight Special TV show from sometime in the mid 70s where they do a version of Dixie Chicken, and Emmylou Harris and Bonnie Raitt are both on stage standing next to each other singing background.
Uh-huh.
And so, Lowell George and his buddies were able to attract some very talented and, forgive me, very attractive women to come on stage with them. And then
the Midnight Special, we really need something that can replace that. I mean, they got all the good shit. A listing of bands that performed on the Midnight Special. I mean, you have got all the top stuff. Really, we need some type of replacement for that. You'd think with all the content and all the stuff out there, we could get these bands that are currently the top of the heap on a place that we could see them on a weekly basis, and there just hasn't been a replacement for it. That was a great show with some great performances.
Yeah. So in any case, All That You Dream is track number 2, and it's a good one. Moving on, the third track is from their 4th album, Feats Don't Fail Me Now. It's written by Bill Payne, the keyboard player, and it's called "Oh Atlanta." And why don't we start with a clip and listen to the first minute and a half or so of the song, and then we can start our discussion on the other side.
Sounds good.
All right. This song is, and we've talked about this, and this was an aspect of music in the 70s, particularly in the early 70s, that an element of boogie, connected to rock music as opposed to like disco music. And I think this is a good example of that. It's just this guy's excited to go. He's dreaming about a redheaded woman, and if you could only see her tonight, oh Atlanta, I got to get back to you. And I'll tell you, when at one point, this was in 1988, I was living in Milwaukee. Me and a couple of friends drove from Milwaukee to Atlanta to see the Grateful Dead at the Omni, which was still there at the time, and not the best Dead concert I ever saw, but the road trip was a blast. And I tell you, for a few days before we left, we were singing "Oh Atlanta."
You were looking forward to getting there. You, though, that would have been a situation where you knew you were going there in a couple days. And I get a feel from when I listen to this song that he's thinking about Atlanta, thinking about going back to Atlanta, thinking about these things that he likes in Atlanta. But I don't sense that there is a time on the imminent horizon where he's going to get to go to Atlanta. It's kind of like and we've talked about this before, certainly with myself. From the time I spent in the military and that type of thing, there is a special feeling about wanting to go home, but knowing you can't. And I hear that when I hear this song. Not that it's a sad song. It's not. It is a upbeat. You got all those parts of your body moving and that type of thing, like Little Feat happens to do. But that's what I hear. I mean, this guy's up in Kentucky near the Ohio border, thinking about Atlanta, wishing he could go, but he doesn't go. He's just thinking about it. He can think about it, but he can't do it. And that's what that's what I hear here. But the focus is on how good things are in Atlanta, and that's what you feel. It's his memories of his hometown that are coming through in the song. It's a fun song. It's a great song, and it's one of those songs where you got to find something to do with all the parts of your body.
We'll play a clip before we finish our discussion of the song, because there's some fairly screaming guitar, lead guitar at the end. But it's and I kind of agree with you. This isn't about a guy that's going to Atlanta. This is about a guy that wants to go to Atlanta.
Yes. Yeah.
You're definitely. I mean, the lyrics clearly indicate that. So he's thinking about it, and just thinking about it, it's got his toe tapping.
Yeah.
And one of the later lyrics in the song is, you can drop me off on Peach Street. I got to feel that Georgia sun, and the women there in Atlanta, they make you awfully glad that you came. And then I'm watching them planes. I wish I was on one. Sitting here thinking if I could only be there tonight. It really is. It's not a song about going somewhere. It's a song about wanting to go somewhere.
Yep.
And why. And he's telling us why. It's pretty straightforward. Again, we're not looking at Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen here. This is pretty straight. It's straightforward. I think party music is a little. I don't think that quite it sums it up sufficiently. It's good rockin' stuff, and why don't, before we finish up our discussion, let's listen to some of the guitar towards the end, and then continue after.
Let's hear some guitar.
there. I mean, it just, it's, that is the sort of thing where it's hard not to think about getting up off your feet and just dance. I mean, the sort of thing where everybody's dancing.
Yeah.
You hear that music and you look out over a crowd and you just picture everybody dancing.
Yeah.
At least I do.
Yeah, and I would say that this is good party music. This whole album. This is a live album to put on when you got people over and that type of thing. I think it's perfect for that type of environment. But moving along. He's singing about something he loves, and the playing reflects that. It's really a great song.
That guitar break at the end of the song just always got me thinking of just everybody dancing.
Yeah.
Like a street party or a block party where everybody's just the song "Dancing in the Streets."
Yeah.
This song makes me think there'd be dancing in the streets. It's
Yep.
So it's just
I'd
good.
agree.
So good upbeat. It provides what live rock and roll is supposed to provide.
Yep.
And not that all music is or not all rock music was intended to be dance music, but a lot of it was, and this just is fits right into that type of get up on your feet and move around and make noise and have fun kind of music.
Yep.
All right, we got one more track on this side, and this is a song was written by Paul Barrere, and his father helped him write the lyrics. And the title of the song is "Old Folks Boogie," and this is a song that makes a lot more sense now. For those of us like you and I, for whom age 60 is in the rear view mirror, it's easier to understand where this song is coming from. Let's listen to the first minute and a half of the song or so, and then we'll take up the discussion on the other side.
All right, let's boogie.
The beginning of the track, it has that sort of odd syncopation that we've talked about, polyrhythm or what have you, and the opening verse is a little screwbally, off our rockers, acting crazy, with the right medication we won't be lazy. But the chorus that you hear at the end of that clip is I think one of my favorite set of lyrics, and it particularly comes home to roost for me lately. And it's, and that you're over the hill when your mind makes a promise that your body can't fill. Doing the old folks boogie, and boogie we will, 'cause to us the thoughts as good as the thrill.
Yep. Sometimes you just got to imagine it, but it don't mean that that's not good.
And sometimes that's the only option.
Exactly.
It's a good, quirky, offbeat, Little Feat type song. And this song came off of their sixth album called Time Loves a Hero, which came out in 1977. So it really is kind of the tail end of their studio output as a band, really. You know, the final album I mentioned that came out in 1979, a year after this live album, Waiting for Columbus, that we're talking about, had some Lowell George songs on it, and he sang on them. But I mean, he wasn't involved in the final production, everything like that. It was this comes from their kind of the pinnacle. I wouldn't say the pinnacle of the quality of their records, but certainly at their, you know, they'd come to sort of the high point of their career in terms of, I'm still saying this wrong. They had the most experience at that time of any of the studio material that they'd done before this live album when they put this song up.
Yeah.
And one of the aspects of this live album that we haven't talked about yet was that the Tower of Power horn section. And that was a band from the 70s, you know, in the United States. And I don't know if I ever heard any of their actual music that they, you know, recorded and put on albums. But you hear about the Tower of Power horn section kind of being, you know, going out and doing sessions and whatnot. Well, the Tower of Power horn section played with Little Feat on this album. And certainly they were at the concerts in Washington, D.C., where the songs were recorded. And this song actually was recorded at the Rainbow Theatre in London.
Mm-hmm.
And they were there as well. And there is really some just smoking slide guitar, punctuated by the Tower of Power horn section at the end of this song. Why don't we give it a listen, a little bit of it a listen, and then we can finish up our discussion after.
Okay.
Okay, where I come from, that is some smoking slide guitar.
Well, and I think that it's really intentional that, you know, musically, this song has so much energy, right? There's so much going on there. Now we're talking about, right, a situation where people have gotten too old to rock and roll. Right, or at least rock and roll like they used to. And there's also some allusion in the lyrics too. It's not just, you don't run out of the physical energy, you also run out of the money to be going and doing some of the things that, you know, you didn't mind spending money on when you were younger. So that's an element of it as well. Either way, the capability to do these things that you used to do earlier is as they say in here, well, look, we're just going to imagine this, or we're going to do this the best we can, right? And intentionally, it's like we are still in the groove, regardless if we can't move, regardless if we can't pay for it, right? The groove is still there, and I think that reflects in the music. I mean, otherwise this would be some kind of downtrodden march into, an elderly state, which this is not. This is jamming right through to the end, and it does. I certainly think this way. You pointed out we're both looking back at 60. I do not rock like I used to rock in many, many ways. However, that attitude of, look, I want to stop and I want to listen to some music. I want to be social with some other people. I want to have some music playing while I'm doing that. I want to go to different places. I want to have fun. That certainly is all still there. And in my mind, I'm jamming just the way that band is in this song to end the track. To end the side, excuse me. Great song.
Well, that's really a good way. That's really a good way to describe it, because if you've lived a full life and you've had the opportunity to do certain things and see certain places and experience certain things, like whether it's going to a Grateful Dead concert or going to a Little Feat concert or whatever it might be, and if everything is copacetic in your life, and you're not filled with regret or whatever, if you're more or less satisfied with what you've done up to the point where you are, it's not necessarily so bad. Mm-hmm. To just be able to think about it. And because I still listen to a lot of music. I don't listen to music as regularly as I used to, and I don't have music on in the background if I'm doing something. Sometimes if I'm in the kitchen, cutting up vegetables for something I'm going to make or whatever, I'll listen to music. But if I sit and read, I don't usually have music on in the background. If I'm doing something at the computer, if I'm writing something, I don't have music on in the background. But when I do sit down, I mean, I've since retirement, I've soaked some money into some nice equipment.
Yep.
And
a good listening experience.
And when I'm sitting listening to stuff, the right music makes me feel as good as it did, 40 years ago.
Oh yeah.
There's no question about that. And sort of the not downtrodden tone of this song kind of fits in with that.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, if all I got to do is sit here and think about it, let her fucking rip,
Yeah.
I'd say in terms of the songs, I'd say that this last track is not necessarily they're all good songs, I think, but I think that the first three tracks are a little stronger musically and whatnot, but with this caveat, they are jamming, they are smoking, and at the end of this, and there may, depending on what you read, there may be some studio overdubs on this album. I don't really care, it sounds great, but this, I think that if you really want to get a taste of what Lowell George was able to do with a slide guitar when he was on his game, that jam at the end is a great place to start.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And that concludes this side, and the whole album is worthwhile. It's a double album, so there's 3 more sides, and I would encourage anyone to check out this album, both side 1 and the rest of it, and any of those first 6 studio albums by Little Feat, for someone who's interested in this type of stuff, are well worthwhile, with my recommendation being that the Dixie Chicken album from 1973 and the Feats Don't Fail Me Now from 1974 are the pick of the crop. But
kind of the center of that group of 6 before we got here, and they've got a a unique sound that, as I've talked about, this kind of, multi-movement boogie type feel that they have. It's fun, and it comes out in the music that they have. So I would agree. It's certainly worth a listen all the way through.
Definitely. Yeah, if you see, they've got these digital jukeboxes now out at taverns,
Yeah.
and you can play. They've got like whole albums that are available. You're out at a bar on a Friday or Saturday night. People are unwinding and loosening up and looking to have a good time. You play 4 or 5 Little Feat songs like these that we're talking about. Nobody's going to be pissed off.
No. They'll keep you moving, and it is an interesting band. I would agree with how you started that. I think for a lot of reasons that and then some that just can't be explained. I mean, they never really got huge commercial traction, Little Feat, but they've got an absolute kind of unique sound that is, when you hear Little Feat, it's like that's a Little Feat song. And what they were successful at is getting people out of their chairs and moving, which for a lot of people playing rock and roll music, that is enough. And they certainly achieved it. So very interesting band.
Well, and just as a final thought, when they reformed in the late 80s, they were, I never bought one of the albums that they put out of new material, but I did go to see them, and they toured for a long time. I mean, for a number of years, and they were successful touring. Yeah. And the reason why is because they played these shows and they were able to more or less do what they were able to do in I believe that the material in this album may have been recorded in 1977. Mm-hmm. The concerts themselves, but they were able to more or less achieve what they did then.
Yeah.
And but
and that the fact that they were a good live act makes it really appropriate that we're leveraging this as one of our live albums. So interesting band, important album, and great album by that band, and this particular side being a great one to get the conversation going, and a good conversation that we had, Mike.
Definitely. All right, Mark, we will talk to you next time.